Greetings, brothers and sisters. Trump's ex-national security advisor, Michael Flynn, calls for a Miramar-type coup in the U.S.
I'm a simple Marine. I want to know why what happened in Myanmar can't happen here.
Woo! Martial law, woo! Military takeover of America, woo!
You know, no reason. I mean, it should happen here. No reason. But that's right.
So this clown Michael Flynn, a hero among Cubies. But just, I don't know, 4 months ago when he was under criminal investigation and things went south on Trump and the Cubies, I covered this is from my video, JoJo and John Kerry hilarious quote, and General Flynn says, no plan. And this is him saying no plan. This is from my video, so there's going to be some, well, we'll just play it here. Send me this. It's General Flynn now says there is no plan. There never was no plan. The military's not involved. And if this isn't the death knell for those Cubies, I don't know what is. If they're not going to wake up and smell the roses now, I don't know if they ever will.
If it's nonsense or if there was anything to it at all. Number one, did President Trump ever sign into action the Insurrection Act?
No. Nonsense.
Nonsense. Is the United States military running the country or just is that nonsense as well?
More nonsense.
Good to hear.
More nonsense. There's no plan. There's so many people out there. Is the plan happening? There's no, we have what we have, and we have to accept the situation as it is. But now we have something about it. So I'll get into more questions.
So there was no plan. Like the plan that the Cubies talk about, because Q wasn't real. That's the first thing. Like Q wasn't real, right? Q wasn't what Q said. Well, Q was real in the sense that it was, there's this thing called QAnon, this, this person or, a government official working for the CIA or the NSA or whatever that said that they were a Q-level security, they had Q-level security clearance, and there was a secret group of patriots working within the system who had control over everything, and Trump was their leader, and they were fighting the deep state. That wasn't real. Like, that wasn't true. That was, it was real in the sense that was that happened, then the, QAnon forum, but it wasn't, the person was lying, right? Q has been a lie since the beginning, a lie that pandered to the extreme right-wing aspect of the truth community. There's a group of people who aren't really truthers because they still believe in the right wing. And a military takeover of America would not be a good thing. The military isn't, some sort of pristine organization. The military, you have all these extreme right-wingers thinking the military is, wonderful, and it's not. It's a military. They're trained to kill people. They're not trained to govern. They're not trained to be, there's corruption in the military. And when the military takes over, you lose all your rights. Like America ceases to exist when you have military forces occupying your own country. If you look back at you go to any situation where the military takes over and occupies its own country, it's almost always a horror show. Maybe the exception is Gaddafi in Libya, where there was a bloodless coup, but it wasn't really a coup. The leader left the country, a corrupt king, and Gaddafi said, don't come back, right? And so it wasn't really a military takeover. It wasn't like, the government was seized. The guy sort of was fleeing the country, King Aziz, and Gaddafi was running the military, said, yeah, don't come back, right? And so that was not really, you could call it a coup, but it wasn't troops on the streets and going against the, results of the election. And the results of the election, whether there was cheating or not, and there's always cheating, are the results of the election. There's a winner and there's a loser. And JoJo was the winner and Trump was the loser. And Trump caused some of his own. I mean, Trump, shot himself in the foot multiple times. And the way that the thing fell apart at the end, with Trump turning on his followers and, because of the so-called insurrection in the Capitol on January 6th, and Michael Flynn bailing and saying there was no plan, and, all this stuff, the lawsuits, and Sidney Powell, who was just a complete tool. And even worse is that guy, Lynn Woods, and it's a crap show, right? It's just, there's nothing there. And what needs to be known about this, what's essential to understanding what people call the elite, or what I call the controllers, and the people running the system, is that they will be disempowered without any of us doing anything. Their leadership and their system is unsustainable. It's not backed by God, and every system collapses one way or another. You give it enough time, and the system collapses. And right now, if you see what's being pushed out there, what's being sold to kids as their culture, their social situation, their view. I mean, this bizarre, pseudoscience that's being pushed out there, all of it. What the kids are growing up with as reality is an abomination of the natural order of things, abomination of, God's universe, and our whole system is that anyway. And so it's not sustainable. Somebody wrote a comment that I thought is, worth bringing into this video here. The promise is sustainable. The greed and power is what has destroyed the American dream. Turning our backs on God doesn't help either. And this person certainly doesn't understand the system at all, because greed is the point of the system, right? If you ever saw the movie Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, this guy was taking over companies and destroying them, right? Selling off their pieces. And he has this famous speech, greed is good. And greed is the point of our economic system. It's not based in God or divine principles. There's very little God in our system. Our religion isn't really good. Our religion is the religion of America, the European religion, is very materialistic. It's focused on material things and miracles and things like this. It's a very, immature religion. And it's all but disappeared. See, this idea of the pursuit of happiness in the Constitution, this idea of, everyone gets to pursue happiness, and that's manifested in materialism. Happiness through stuff, happiness through quality of life, happiness through wealth. Everybody pursuing wealth, right? People pursuing, economic gain and material, the gain of material lifestyle. And so that's okay if it's balanced out with a relationship with God. So if you have a relationship with God and divinity, you also have to have a material wing because you have a body. And so it's okay to pursue a better quality of life. One of the great teachings of the heartfulness system is that you need two wings to fly, right? The bird needs both wings, a material wing or a spiritual wing. And Master Charji, the third master of the system, said he was looking up at these, birds of prey, vultures or eagles or whatever they were, that were soaring, hawks. They were just floating on the wind current. And if they tilted their wing one way, they would just spin in circles. And that's what's happened in our system, our material system. But it can happen on a spiritual level, because there have been people who go and meditate 18 hours a day. They're just spiritual. Like they have these sannyasis in India that go off into the woods and they don't contribute anything to society. And so that's the neglect of your material wing, and you're spinning in circles that way. So you have a material life, and you have to live your material life. You have to, engage in material activities, have a job, contribute to society, have a family, these things. But with that, you have to have a connection with God. Another beautiful thing about the heartfulness system, where there's no priest class. The people who are trainers, and even the master himself of the system, all had jobs, careers, and families. So they have material lives and material responsibilities, but also they, focus on spirituality. So there's a balance there, finding a balance between the two. But our system doesn't have any God in it. It says in God we trust on our money, but it isn't really God that they're talking about. Our system is about greed, because if you get to the top of the system, it means you're a billionaire, it means you're rich and famous, it means you have an opulent lifestyle. You could be a trillionaire maybe even a quadrillionaire, who knows, right? And so the people who are running the system, who have the most power in the system, who have been most successful in the system, are rich. They're at the top of the system, and they have, assumed a greedy position because they have more than they could ever spend. You can't, spend $1 billion. I mean, it's just, multiple $1 billion or $1 trillion, because there's trillionaires in this world, right? And so you have these families, the royal family and, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, all these, families with generational wealth, trillionaires. And then you have these new, billionaires. They're just hoarding resources. They're hoarders. And this is, the pinnacle of what our system's about. It's about greed. It's about becoming, having more and more and more and more. Everyone wants more. Like everybody in the system has been bred and trained to have more. Greed is good. And the simple fact is you can't have wealth without poverty. So if you have wealthy people, you're going to have impoverished people, because wealth is judged in comparison to other people. You have the average, the norm, the middle class, right? So people are middle class, you're average. You have average. If you're poor, you're below average. If you have, money, upper middle class. If you're rich, you're a millionaire, multimillionaire. Then there's the real wealthy, the, 1%ers, the people in the top of the capsule in the pyramid, as well as people who are famous. And there's other materialistic ways of judging wealth, right? But all of this is judged on a scale comparing wealth to poverty. And so the whole idea of wealth is predicated on other people having less than you. You have more. And being a wealthy country, being the greatest country, whatever it might be, right? In terms of all the slogans you hear with America, and people being selfish and, doing for themselves and hoarding wealth is a part of the system, right? This is, what you're supposed to do, having a killer instinct and all the rest of it. So this idea that, the American dream is sustainable, no, because it's based in wealth and it's one-sided. There's no God in it. People who have a godly relationship, you have these tribal situations, and you have like homesteaders and, pioneers and agrarian type of, village-based life, villages and tribes. And the people lived for each other. The strong, the people who had more capacity to work would, help the weak. But the weak had to do something. There was no real weak, right? Some people were stronger than others and could do more work, or, had more life energy than other people. But all of them were working hard, right? It wasn't where there's people doing nothing like you have now in our current system. People have given up. They don't want to be a part of the greedy system for whatever reason. And so they're not functioning in it, or they feel blocked, or they don't, they're in the poverty class, and then the wealthy are supposed to carry them because, they're wealthy, and that's how the system has to work, or the impoverished people will band together and turn over the system. And so, and what I'm talking about in a village-based or a tribal situation is that everyone is participating and giving to everyone else. People have skills, then they pass the skills on to other people. Everyone has to have a role in the society. Everybody has to do work, and they're working for each other selflessly. There's a connection to God and divinity and nature more than anything else, because there's not much upward movement. That's the problem with these, agrarian-based communities in the past. They weren't evolving spiritually. They were just living nice lives in harmony with nature, working with each other, selflessly, and they weren't focused on hoarding wealth. Maybe some people had a little bit more than other people, but not this huge disparity gap in wealth. Because of the debt-based system, they can create lots of artificial wealth, fake wealth, based in debt, based in, money that they're just printing, or now making out of cyber money, right? Making electronic digital money. It's not worth anything. It's not real. It's not material, and so they have to put it in material assets to make it real. But they've created all this artificial wealth, and you have people who are trillionaires because of it. And this idea of focused on just making money and just becoming wealthy, because the people who are hoarding wealth, that's what they focus on. They don't have good relationships with their families. They don't have for the most part, they don't put energy into anything else. It's a one-pointed goal and activity to become more and more wealthy, because they just they're locked into it. It's like consumes them, and all they think about is getting more and more and more and more and more. And everybody's on that scale, but people have other things that are important to them: hobbies, free time, family, and things. So they don't make as much money because they're not totally focused on that one activity. But that's what the economy is about, for everyone to be very materialistic and seek their pleasure, seek their happiness through the material system. And there's no idea of connecting to God internally, even on a religious level. People go do their time in church or whatever it is, right? Synagogue or mosque or even ashrams and things like this. They do their time, and they are watching the clock until they go out and can enjoy the material world. And that's a one-sided focus where everything is materialistic and a total lack of spirituality and connection to God. So it's out of balance, and we're spinning in circles. And after a while, generation after generation, people become more and more unhappy. They become dissatisfied because they're not living a complete life. And their soul, which is the causation, the causal body of the physical body, is not being nurtured, and its plan and its needs and the reason for being here isn't being addressed, because you have a spiritual need. Your soul has a need to move closer to God through your material life and your material experiences. And when you neglect that, when your ego and your desire for wealth and fame and these diva-like egotistical desires takes over, and your soul's purpose for being here is ignored, then you start cracking up psychologically, and all of these ways that you become like an abomination yourself, because you're out of balance. You're not connected to God. You're not here. You're not living your true purpose here. You're not finding out what your path is. You're just indulging, and after a while, the indulgences lead to mental illness. There was a great talk by Master Chargy, the third master of the Heartfulness system, and he was talking about how that when you have problems and miseries and things, it keeps you sane, right? Like when you have duties and responsibilities, worries or with stress and things like this, it acts to bind your personality together, and you stay somewhat sane. I mean, too much stress and too much, leads to despair and hopelessness. But you have, enough of these problems and things, and you have, whatever it is that's like talks about, Illit, Killit, and Zillat, slightly less than you need, slightly poor health, and critics. It keeps you, your personality together. But when people are indulgent and they're rich and they don't have material worries and they just seek pleasure after pleasure, you see these rich people, it diffuses, their personality just falls apart, right? That's why they have all these mental illnesses, because it's not being bound together. You see this with people who retire, because they are like, all right, now I'm just going to go on permanent vacation, right? And you see that probably now with people in COVID who are taking unemployment because they don't want to work, and they can get more money for COVID relief. And so what happens to them, what happened with my dad was he complained about his job. He was a guidance counselor, and he complained, and he couldn't wait for his retirement. He talked about it all the time. And he fell apart physically and mentally, and he was bored out of his mind. He had no purpose anymore, and he just fell apart. You see this with people who retire, and they're doing pretty well when they're working, and they keep on going, and as soon as they retire, they fall apart. They realize they don't want to play golf. They retire to Florida or Arizona or Utah or, one of these warm places, and they realize they don't want to play golf 4 days a week, right? Or pickleball or whatever this is called, pickleball. My brother was like, I met a woman, my brother's in his 70s, he was like, I met a woman playing pickleball. My brother was like a great athlete. He was, a warrior. He was somebody, fought in Vietnam, and he was playing pickleball. But I mean, when you lose your sense of purpose, I should also say, maybe I should call my brother today. I'm not sure what his protocol is, but he used to talk about how Memorial Day was a tough day for him. Today is Memorial Day, and I don't know how this is for most soldiers, but certainly he said for Vietnam vets who felt kind of betrayed by the, everything, and they weren't allowed to win is a big, part of that. And so he just got bummed out every Memorial Day because, he felt, betrayed by the government and the system, the way the Vietnam War went down. But anyways, when you take away somebody's work, and the older generation now is, everyone just pushes their family away. Their parents go to nursing homes or go to Florida, and there's a sort of a buffer zone like they talked about in Seinfeld between, the people in their 30s and 40s or 20s and their, aging parents. And so the grandkids come every once in a while, but the grandparents don't have, anything to teach their grandkids, whatever specified job. Everyone has a specified skill or job in our system, and they're not going to, talk to their grandkids about accounting or business management or any of these things, right? Because they don't really have anything to pass on to them in terms of skills, and there's not really much there. And so the older generation that retires is just waiting to die. They don't have a purpose and a goal. Maybe they go work at Walmart or, whatever it might be, just to keep themselves going because, they're bored out of their minds and they don't have a purpose, right? They don't have a role to play. They're not contributing to society in any way. There's nothing for them to do. And so they fall apart mentally and physically. And, it's just the nature of our system. The system's done with them. They're old and they can't, perform the functions that the system can just pay a younger person less. And with modernization and, their era passes them by. What they knew about is out of date, and they're just, and they've put no energy and effort into spirituality and their connection to God. Because when you're an older person, then you become more and more spiritual. It's easier to meditate. It's easier to connect to God. You're now going to make the transition back to the source, but you have to do it when you're young. You have to begin this journey when you're young, because that's when you have life energy and you have, the ability to, you need to start the internal connection. This is the heartfulness system, right? Start this heart-based connection with God and form this relationship. And then as you grow older, you've, built good foundation of your spiritual movement, and you start to meditate and you can connect to God, and, now you're starting to transition back to the source, right? It's not some shock to your system where you're gradually spending a lot more time in the spiritual world, where your subtle bodies and your soul is, connected to the etheric world. And then you have this wisdom that you can impart on your family members and, your social circle and society, because you're detached. You don't have an emotional investment, and your material needs and your material life is fading, and you're becoming more and more spiritual. When you're a baby and you're a young kid, you're very materialistic because you're just learning about the material world. And you get into your 20s. The heartfulness meditation used to be for people who are, 18 and older. Now it's for 15. Daji has changed it, Kamish Patel, the current master. But Babaji said that young people, if they meditated and they received the transmission, would just lose interest in material life. And so they could get it vicariously through their parents, right, and their family. The parents receive the transmission, and then it's, passed on through just interaction, not a meditation or a sitting to the kids. And so they get it. There's this energy there, but they're learning about their material lives, and then they get into their 20s. But even then, Master Charji's son, who was in America, he went to Syracuse University, and he wrote to his father saying, that, or maybe he talked to Babaji about it, that he felt that Babaji was stopping or not increasing his spiritual evolution. And Babaji said, yeah, you need to set up yourself materially, get a job, get a family. And so your focus is more, 80% material and 20% spiritual. And then as you get older, you start meditating more, your body starts to break down. When you hit like 40 or whatever it is, there's a midway point in your life, a halfway point, right, where your life is half over. And so now at that, whenever that happens, and it might be over a series of years, you start to become more and more spiritual at that point because your body is, falling apart. Your work is less and less, right? Your kids are now, going off on their own and things like this. And when your kids become 20 and 30, they start taking over your work and you have less responsibilities. And now you're more responsible to be spiritual and be wise and, right, disconnect from material life, and your emotions are less, your lower level emotions. And now you become more of a feeling person and your heart develops. And this is what should happen. This is what happens in the heartfulness system. And you are now beginning to get in touch with where you're going more and more. And you get into your 70s and 80s and you're spending a lot of time in the etheric worlds, getting ready for that transition when your body ceases to exist and your soul transitions. Lology, the first master of the heartfulness system, he had, all of his loved ones and some of his, spiritual followers. There was no organization then. There was no heartfulness organization. People just came over Lology's house and he transmitted to them. So this was like the beginning of the heartfulness system. And there's all these people around him, and he was, dying from a liver abscess. And he says, it's time for me to go. And they're like, what's, happening? He said, well, I can see all the liberated souls have come down to bring my soul back to the source, right? And so, there's this more and more spiritual beings are around you. I mean, this is what should happen. And you're getting prepared for the journey. One of the ways that people express that somebody dies, they say that the person's gone, right? And that means the soul's gone. The body's there, right? The body didn't disappear in most cases, but the soul is, what has left, right? When I looked at my grandfather, the first person I saw that was dead, and my grandfather was somebody, he was bigger than life. I've talked about, played professional football for $10 a game and took me deep sea fishing. He made fishing poles and boats, and he had all kinds of skills, fought in 2 world wars. And so when he died, I went to his wake and I looked at him like he's not there. Like, his body's there, but it was just, human flesh. His essence was no longer there. The soul moves on. And so back to my original point here is that when a system is not balanced in terms of spirituality or materiality, it could be too spiritual or too materialistic. And if people aren't, in their appropriate time frame, like everyone has it's a season of your life or whatever you want to call it. And so it's appropriate for you to be materialistic when you're younger and then, more competitive and more into your body and things like this, be more physical. And then as you get older, to be more spiritual. And as you've lived through your life and your duties and you've achieved the tasks that have been placed in front of you by your soul's path and things like this, your material tasks. And so somebody who lives a natural life is in the flow of things and living the way that, God designed it, that the system is designed for and you are designed for, then you're in the flow and that's sustainable. But if a system's out of balance, then it's not sustainable. And our system is so out of balance. So all these people who are like, wow, we can, we got to do something, we got to overthrow the controllers. Well, no, you don't. Obviously, you don't, right? Because the system's collapsing. Because what most people want, is to save their lifestyle by somehow taking over the evil, from the evil people that control the system. But the whole system is evil because it's, out of balance and it's materialistic and it's not appropriate for what we're supposed to be doing. And so people want to overthrow the leadership thinking they can make the system good, and the system is essentially good, like this commenter, that it is sustainable. It's never sustainable. A debt-based system is never sustainable. A system based in materiality and wealth is never sustainable because it doesn't represent your true purpose here. You have a spiritual purpose. And, there's not enough resources, and it only focuses on one side of the human experience, the material side. And so there's no spirituality. There's no, and spirituality is far superior to religion. Somebody wrote a comment saying something about like, spirituality without religion was something or something. I can't remember what they said. And that's, again, not understanding what I'm talking about here. Spirituality is having an internal connection with God. Religion is where the religion acts as a middleman between you and God, and the religion becomes a materialistic organization with material religious power, not godly power, and they use your, allegiance to them, your devotion to them, as material leverage. You see this with all the religions. The religions are, they have religious power, which is, a very powerful organization because of the devotion of the people to the religion. But the religion doesn't bring you to God, doesn't connect you with God. They act as a middleman. In fact, they prevent you from connecting to God, and they scare you off from connecting to God. So spirituality, which is having an internalized relationship with God, which is what the heartfulness system promotes. I mean, it facilitates this relationship, but you have to work on the relationship. It's not something where they are in charge of it, right? Like they are, you don't have to do anything. Like that's why you have to meditate. You have to, think about God. You have to, make this connection and work on it. There's all this work that you have to do. Work on your character qualities so you don't form grossness that blocks your connection to God. And so it's a system it helps facilitate a natural connection that's already there. You have a soul in you, and your heart is an instrument in which you can connect to God. And the heartfulness system, with the transmission and the cleaning, makes this process easier. And, it feels better because you can experience God's love on a deep level, even if you're just starting the system. But it's not an organization in the sense like where churches say, well, if you're part of the organization, we'll take care of you. That doesn't happen in the heartfulness system. You'll be watched over, like you'll be, but if you don't participate in it, if you're not going along with your spiritual journey, if you're just saying, oh, I do the heartfulness system, but you don't really do it, right? You don't really think about it. You're just, in name only, like people just sitting there in church thinking about, having fantasies or this or that, thinking about watching football or whatever it might be, planning their day out, not really listening to what the pastor is saying, looking around the synagogue or the church or the mosque or whatever it is, jealous, being jealous of other people or desiring other people. I mean, all these things, right? Not focusing on God when you're there, not thinking about God, not having a divine experience like that, that stuff doesn't work in the heartfulness system. You have to do it, right? You have to, participate. You have to do your part. But anyways, getting back to the central point of this, these people who think that the government or the power structure has to be overthrown don't really understand what's happening here. The system itself is, run its course. It's coming down in whatever way it's going to come down, whatever, length of time it takes. And you don't have to do anything unless it's your God-given role to participate in it, dismantling the system or whatever. But I mean, in this case, it's just going to collapse. There's nothing for anybody to do. You can see we're going, into the abyss, right? And remember, everything is recorded on a spiritual level. Nothing that happens here is, ignored, or no one's given a free pass. Everything is accounted for. Your soul makes you account for everything that you do on a spiritual level. You're putting your soul in a bad position by going away from God and going away from your true purpose and doing things in a wrong way, because you have to pay for those things in future endeavors and future existences. It keeps you bound to planet Earth because you have to, live off your samskaric burden, the things that you've, done here, whatever it might be, good or bad, things that are done without God's will and the backing of your soul, without, some sort of connection to God, the divine connection with God, where you're working in partnership. Everything that you do that doesn't involve God and your soul ends up being something you have to work off in a future existence. You're bound to planet Earth until you graduate by connecting to God at a deep level and realizing your spiritual sovereignty and your spiritual purpose on a soul level, and then achieving that. And so all those people who run the system who are doing bad things are going to come back and have to suffer the consequences. Not that God's punishing them, they're punishing themselves by their choices. And so you don't have to do anything about that, right? You're not your brother's keeper in this sense, where you're responsible to punish the people who are, going in the wrong direction, taking everybody along with them. The system itself will collapse. The power structure will come down. And so what are you going to do instead? Like, what should you be doing then? If it isn't your role, I mean, the people who are following the Q movement think that it's their role collectively to take down the evildoers, and then the system will be, it's like they're removing a cancer from a glorious divine system where the military is great and the economy is great, and it's just none of those things, right? The economy, there's always going to be poor people throughout the world. And so in terms of this poverty, I was going to make a long video about this, but I guess I'll include it here because it's really the second half of this video. And so, there's I got comments whenever I make a comment video, or once in a while someone just say this out of the blue. They'll say that I've gotten arrogant, or my YouTube success has gotten to my head. It's made my ego grow, and nothing could be like further from the truth, because I don't really experience YouTube success, right? Like, I'm talking to myself. Like, I'm good at sitting in front of a computer and talking to myself. This is, I've gotten good at that. I've gotten better and better at that. But like, it's not like I'm standing in front of an audience. You receive it like I'm talking to you. Like, you receive it like even that it's a personal interaction. And sometimes, God uses me as a conduit, a vessel to talk to individual people, or, to get messages out that I'm not consciously aware of it. It speaks to you, God's speaking to you through me. I mean, that happens throughout your whole life. God's speaking to you one way or another, through somebody else, or, whatever it is. The events in your life. I mean, even in terms of the heartfulness system and the trainers of the system, oftentimes the trainers or the preceptors aren't aware of what you're receiving on your end. The better ones are, or sometimes, they go into a state of samadhi and they're out. So they're not even aware of what you're receiving. And so you think it's coming from them, but it's coming through them. And so that's, what's happening here on this YouTube channel to whatever extent. And if you feel a personal connection to me and the energy, it's because of my connection to the heartfulness system and my connection to God through that system, that system, enables that connection. And then the insights I have and, the things that I say here. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, my 2 dogs are with me today, right? One of them is cleaning himself, licking himself. The other one's sleeping. But I'm just here talking to myself. And the reason I don't do live videos, I don't do as good a job when I have other people around. Their energy and their consciousness and, these things have an effect on me and the quality of these messages. When I'm by myself and I can just, settle in and, have a spiritual connection. I'm not, distracted by other people, and, other people's thought processes and consciousness and vibrations are in the room with me. It's much better. The videos are much better, and it's easier for me to do this. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm just really good at talking to myself into a microphone and putting pictures to it, or, whatever it is, analyzing things. And, some of the stuff is specific to me, the jokes and some of the ways I view things, and some of the things that are specific to my essence and personality. But as far as interaction with people, I make the video, I put the video up, I forget most of the video. Like, people will be quoting things in the video that I've already forgotten about that day. And so then you guys receive it and hear the video, and then you have your own reaction. But in terms of me thinking of it being like a star or something, like, there's no, I mean, as far as I know, all the comments are computer generated, and nobody's listening to this, right? Like, I've only met, I don't know, like 10 people who have listened to my videos. I mean, at least in terms of, people I didn't know before. But deeper than that, I mock people here and make fun of people, and there's, some arrogance. I mean, I have to have some sort of edge or something to survive on the internet. Like, I just have to, there has to be some, level of some attitude that you need to survive in this, environment, because it's a toxic environment. And so I have that, I have whatever I need to make it through the, the minefield that's social media. But in terms of like my judging other people, or, any of these things, having, emotional reactions to things, or this idea of cancel culture. Everyone's saying, oh, this person's horrible, and this person said this, and that person said that, and this person's doing this, and this person's, collectively, there's an evil that we're all contributing to that I am painfully aware of. Like, it's just harder to be in denial when you do the heartfulness system. And so there's lots of pain that you receive just from, the cold slap of reality. And so nobody should be saying shit to other people because we're all a part of this. Like, not in the sense of people may be worse than you, but we're all doing something. We're all contributing and a part of something that's way worse than what individuals are doing. And so I realized this. I was very clear on this when America invaded Libya in 2011. So that's 10 years ago. The Iraq stuff and the Afghanistan stuff, that was all, bogus and illegal. But I wasn't as conscious of it. Like, I wasn't aware. I didn't really know what was going on. Like, I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know why. I didn't know as much as I did in 2011 when America invaded Libya. And it was very clear. The information was coming out, and I was very aware of it. And I, went through all this stuff, in terms of understanding what kind of person Gaddafi actually was. Because, we were told, like, if you grew up and you watched Back to the Future, right, and the Libyans are the, the enemies, and they kill Dr. Brown is his name, or whatever it is, right? The guy who's the mad scientist. And he stole plutonium from them, right? They had somehow supplied him with plutonium, which he used to power his DeLorean time machine. And they end up murdering him because he's the good guy, even though he stole the plutonium from somebody else. He's a thief. But in terms of, like, the Libyans were considered enemies, right? Libyans, Gaddafi was mad, and he was a bad person, and he was one of these, axis of evil type of people. And we were told over and over again that he was a bad person. But in reality, he did a good job for his people. And this is well documented. His people, loved him. He had like a 70% approval rating. He had the Green Book, which was, a wonderfully written book about prosperity for all. And the UN had these Millennium Development Goals, which I knew about because I became aware of the UN involvement with the heartfulness meditation, which I was unhappy about because I was learning about the UN at the same time as I learned about this. And I became aware of the Millennium Development Goals, which weren't bad things, most of them. There's 8 goals, and most of them was like poverty, and there were some of them, like number 8 was like having partnerships with corporations, right? Having public and private partnerships, which the UN was pushing, where private corporations would take over public, facilities, roads, or national park. Like the Grand Canyon is now owned by the U.S. government and some private organization, right? So there's, that isn't a good thing, in terms of privatizing, federal resources, which is being done globally. But the other 7 Millennium Development Goals, treatment of women, child poverty, education, things like this. And so the idea was that by 2015, these developing countries would reach these, milestones in their development. And Gaddafi's Libya was on pace to do that. So the UN had already said he's doing a great job. He got rid of the weapons of mass destruction. When he took over Libya, it was the poorest country in Africa. So, Africa is known for poor countries. And then it was the richest country in Africa, where they were, the average per capita income was like $10,000 a person, which was high above the, average in Africa and these other countries. And he was scoring well he was doing well in all these development goals. And his people were benefiting. And all of a sudden the UN said, oh, this guy's torturing people. He's killing his citizens. And Obama and, France and America jumped on this stuff, Hillary Clinton. And they pretended like he was doing something horrible, and we had to destroy him. And it didn't make any sense at all. Because if you did the research, there was reporters there. There was a young woman named like Liz Phelan or something. She was from England, and she had been in Libya for years, and she was like in tears talking about how all the things they were saying weren't true. And later on, the British Parliament came out and said, yeah, this war was an illegal war, and we all bought into these lies that weren't, factual in any way, right? Basically supporting everything that I'm saying here. And so the real reason was Gaddafi was going to sell oil in a gold dinar, a Muslim-based gold dinar that would destroy the petrodollar, and I've talked about the petrodollar before, which would bring the American economy and the world economy into a desperate state. The petrodollar is what's propping up the American dollar. You can only buy oil using dollars, which means the dollar is the world reserve currency. And so because of that, and it's easy to blame Obama, it's easy to blame the UN, but if they didn't do that, we'd all be like eating out of garbage cans. The apocalypse, the real apocalypse, or not, the apocalypse would be upon us right now, like in a way that would be sucky for everybody on a material level. So Gaddafi did the right thing. I mean, he was doing good for his people, and he had every right to sell his oil. And it's a very resource-rich country. Libya is, right? He was doing what was, best for him, or what he thought was best for him in his country, and he had the right to do it. It wasn't an evil thing he was doing. But by doing that, he would have brought down the global economy. If he got a couple of other countries, oil-rich countries, to sell oil for gold, it would bring down the debt-based economy. And so Obama and the UN destroying Gaddafi, I mean, Hillary Clinton cackled about murdering him. There's a lot of evil there, right? I mean, Hillary was worse than Obama. She was like into it. Like this thing, we came, we saw, he died. It's horrible.
So, I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed reports.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
But in terms of them doing it, they saved the global economy, which is, the system is evil, and I know so much more about it even now, of course, 10 years later, and I knew a lot about it then. And so what they did was evil, but it benefited all of us, at least on a material level. It prevented, the destruction of our system that we're 100% dependent on, even though on a spiritual level, it's not good for any of us. And so I looked at it in a more mature way as, time has gone on. And to say that it's just the, so-called elite and Obama and, France and these, and the UN that destroyed Libya and, that country is now in chaos. All of us are a part of that. Like, we don't want to admit it. We don't want to be conscious of it. But our lifestyle, our system needs our military and our government to make things unfair, to screw other people out of their resources. We are, 5% of the population, and we're using at least 20% of the world's resources. So for America to keep on going, we need our government for us to live the lifestyle we're living. We need our government to impoverish other people. And this is what I was saying earlier. If you're going to have people who are wealthy, there's going to be people who are impoverished because, you only judge things by its opposite. You can only experience happiness if you experience sadness. Like somebody who's happy all the time isn't really happy because they don't experience anything else. It's the contrast. It's the opposite of something that defines the experience. You have to have a villain to have a hero, right? Like all these things. You have to have bad to understand good. Like if everybody's good, then there's no such thing as good, right? It's just average. And so, to be a saint, you need sinners. And so things are defined by their opposites. And if there's wealth, there has to be poverty. When some people are eating, the food of 100 other people, right? In America, we're throwing away food while other people are starving. And so I really understood this, not in the sense of having what people call white guilt or, all these things, but just being an American and born into, we really do have privileges here. We're born into privilege, not like the royal family, but sort of, right, on that same scale. And these privileges that we have, having other people's food, every time you go into a Walmart, pick up, anything, even a lot of the vegetables and fruits aren't grown in America. But in terms of like all the other stuff in Walmart, it's made in other countries, right? In sweatshops, and people are suffering to make our goods and, whatever else, services that we have here. We're all participating in that. We're paying taxes to our military, and the military-industrial complex to create weapons, right? Weapons that are going to go all over the globe. You know, people are talking about gun control in America, taking guns away from private citizens, but they're still going to be making guns. Like, they're still going to be making weapons. And those weapons are going to be in somebody's hands, and not just the American military, but also militaries in countries all around the globe. America has long been supplying weapons all over the world. And that's something that we're all part of, because we're paying taxes and we're participating in a system that spends, 60% of our budget on weapons that can destroy the world, right? There's, what did I say? Something like 70,000 nuclear warheads, and we could destroy the world, render the world lifeless thousands of times, right? And we've created this, nuclear arms race across the globe and all these other things. And so, America, we're all part of that. Like, that's our, we can't say, oh, that's the part of the system I don't like, right? That's not has anything to do with me. It has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with me. We're all participating in that. And we're all participating in, every part of it. And so there was a time where I was like, well, we should organize boycotts and boycott some of the more evil companies. And I put it out there, and nobody was interested, because that's the only real power we have. The power to boycott some of these bigger corporations, which would cause, lots of problems for them. And of course, social media. But what isn't evil? Like, what corporation isn't contributing to the evil? Like, are you going to grade it on a scale? This is only number 2 on the evil scale, so I'll buy products from them. But this thing's number 7, Nike's number 7, or number 9, or whatever, up at number 10 level. Like, you're going to grade it on some kind of a scale. I'll only buy products that are 3 or less on the evil scale, from corporations that are 3 or less on the evil scale. See, we're all participating in this. So the cancel culture is ridiculous. I've been talking about this with LeBron and all these faketivists and, these athletes who are cheaters and liars and deceivers, but that's okay, and it's just this other group is bad. Like, everybody wants to look at everybody else and say, those are the evil people. But we're all contributing, and we're all dependent on this system. And so I've just learned to live with it, right? That my existence, my material existence, is hurting the environment to whatever extent, and other people, and I'm participating in something that I know is a system that's demonic. And there's no way, I can't see a way around it, right? Living off the grid, having homesteaded and not being anywhere near to living off their grid, not having the skills and the energy and the drive to do that. But even if you do that, you're still, you're part of the beastly system. I mean, you can, find a way, like, try not to pay taxes or whatever it is. But I mean, it's just, there's no way around it. The system is, all encompassing, more than just our country. It's a global system. There's nowhere to go to run away from it or hide from it. And we're not really supposed to, right? I mean, if I, decided to go off the grid, I wouldn't be able to make these videos and contribute in this way to society or whatever it is. And so we all have to live with our, involvement in this evil system. Like, all of us are, drinking from the trough of this evil system, or eating from the trough of this evil system to some extent. And we just all have to, realize that. Like, not in a sense that we have guilt and shame, because those things don't help anything. And this is the situation our soul and God put us in. And there's no fixing the system. There's no taking the system down. And as soon as the system collapses, it's going to be hard. For the people who survive, it's going to be hard. Like, it's going to be hard. There's no two ways about it. We're not trained. We don't have the skills to, live in some other way. But I'm saying this because the far left and all these, people who are trying to cancel Trump and Trump supporters, and all the people, the QBs on the right, who are like, oh, we got to get the liberals, and, we got to get the deep staters. Like, we're all in this together. Like, there's nobody who's not participating in this. You want to fix something, fix yourself, right? If you want to make the world a better place, find a way to make the world a better place yourself. Not by correcting other people or taking other people down. Like, that's never been the point of my channel. It's not my point personally. Like, I don't care about any of these people. They have to step up, or, they'll be thrown on the garbage heap of the human experiment. Like, when there's going to be something that happens. There's going to be some things that happen. And there's going to be a new paradigm. and people who are crappy people, souls that are, filled with heavy grossness, and they're not connected to God, and they're just selfish, and, they're lost souls, won't be able to come back and live as human beings on planet Earth. There won't be enough spots, right? If you'd reduce the population from 8 billion to, 1 billion or whatever happens, right? When there is a population reduction, which is inevitably going to happen here. It might get up to 10 billion and then go down to 2. I don't know what it's going to be. But what you're going to have is something like 8 souls vying for one human body, right? There's only going to be there's so many souls now that have to come back to planet Earth, because they haven't reached liberation, despite what their religion tells them. Because that's, one of the big lies. Religions, tell people, oh, no, we'll take care of you. You'll go get, 70 virgins and a mule, this stuff. But that's not true. You have to come back and successfully graduate from planet Earth. And so when there are, only one spot for 8 souls that want to create bodies, that want to, become human beings or need to become human beings, and they're, the way that the vibrations are going to change, only the higher developed souls are going to be able to incarnate here. And the lower ones won't be able to live. The vibrations will feel so destabilizing to gross and, ungodly souls that they just won't be able to, find a way to survive on planet Earth. They'll just all leave. That's, some of the prophecies in Revelation have to do with that, right? Not this, trumpet is blown and all the souls go up. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to be, quite the opposite, right? Where the people who, the negative souls, the ones that are filled with heavy grossness and are not willing to participate in the redemption of the human species and going up to a higher vibrational level, or they just don't have it in them. They're not, evolved enough. They're not going to be able to come down here because it's just going to be a place for higher developed souls, right? And it's going to be much easier to connect to God and live a more spiritual life, and material life won't be as easy and as rewarding and really as desirable, because it's going to be a different time. And so when that happens, that'll happen, right? It's, in the process of happening. The system that's demonic and isn't working is collapsing, and a new system is coming about. The Heartfulness meditation is a key component to this. Not in the sense of an organization, but in the sense of the services of the organization that will help people to, vibrate and resonate on a higher level. And so there's a lot of time being wasted in both the, liberal, obviously the mainstream media that's just, focusing on lies and things like this, the liberal media, the liberal people, and the woke movement, but also so many people in the truth community. They're just focusing on the evil done by other people, wanting to get to the, source of the evil, and wanting answers about the evil and why it's evil and who the real doers and who's really responsible for it, and punishing and attacking and trolling those people. When, that's going to take care of itself. You don't have to do anything. That's not, what you do is going to have no bearing in what's going to happen to the people who control the system and their souls. They're already accounted for, and, they have a limited shelf life. That's over. You can see it. So at some point, the so-called elite that people are obsessed with, the people I call the controllers, are no longer going to have control over planet Earth. They've been given this during the Kali Yuga. It's a limited time. Power always moves around and shifts, and they're going to be disempowered. They're not going to, they're going to be erased from the human experience on planet Earth, and their movements and things will crumble along with it. And so we don't have to do anything about that. That's already happening. We don't have to pray for it. We don't have to put energy into it. That's already happening. But what we have to do in terms of our personal spiritual evolution is find our soul's path, connect to God on a deeper level, and prepare and, make ourselves into something, or help our children and grandchildren make themselves into somebody and something that can help in the future. There's just, think about predicting the future and how that has always been very profitable. Understanding what's going to happen in the future, understanding where we're going, and adapting, adjusting yourself. One of the great things that Babaji said, he adjusted himself, on a spiritual level. He would figure out the next stage of his spiritual evolution, where his spiritual master, Lology, was guiding him. He would figure out the next step before it even happened, and he would adjust himself and prepare himself to, best accept that next stage of the journey. It's it's a remarkable feat on the spiritual level. And that's why he had this wonderful spiritual life, because he was able to sort of predict and understand where he was going on a spiritual level and prepare himself and accept it and, be ready to make that transition to the next higher level on the spiritual journey and the spiritual yatra. And so that's like a wonderful example for this. And people can do it. Like anybody can, do that on some level, understand what's happening around them, see it, big picture it, more than your own emotional reaction and your egotistical reaction, and prepare yourself for that. And if you can do that, right, and just see, the writings on the wall, and not be, all right, well, let's, be obsessed with the people who are floundering at the top of the system, who are desperately trying to control something that's out of control, right, something that's beyond their control. And, the cultural things that are happening, that are freaking people out. I mean, I get, constantly sent things that I can't really even cover anymore here and don't really want to, because all these cultural things are unsustainable. Like you can see they're unnatural, they're ungodly, right? All this sort of satanic stuff, whatever it might be, on whatever level it is. And so all these things are unsustainable. The religions are unsustainable. The economy is unsustainable. All of the ways that people are right now are not sustainable. It's not backed by God for any long-term plan. The Kali Yuga has its purpose. This time period has its purpose to draw out the poison and, create a situation where human beings want to jump to another level to redeem themselves from like overindulging. Like you do something really bad and then it sort of shocks you into, like you hit rock bottom and you're like, all right, I'm going to take this seriously. And then you have a strong will and desire to redeem yourself. And that's going to happen collectively for the souls that are going to be here. And the souls that can't do that won't be here. And we don't have to worry about any of that or any of them, right? We just have to focus on what we're supposed to do, moving in a positive direction. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.